Okay. Okay. Thanks. All right. So we're going to start by trying something probably really dumb, which is to do a hands-on live demo where you all get to experience the tool yourself. But today I want you all to get a chance to try one of the tools that we built during the pandemic to make this process of all the work that you saw happen in the morning, all the Docassemble development, faster, easier, more streamlined, and more consistent. And we call that tool the assembly line weaver. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of like the why and the what, and then you're going to get to actually try to use this tool yourself. And you can use it on your laptop. Maybe some brave folks will want to try using it on their phone. I gave it a try and technically it did work for me to do the whole thing on my phone. But if that's something you're interested in, you might want to start getting that out now. If you're not sure, it's okay to just watch and follow along. So let's go back to a moment during the pandemic, right? When we were all dealing with this situation of the courts suddenly being closed. And you heard today about all of the ways that different parts of that court ecosystem responded. The Court Service Center went online. We were thinking about how we could provide some of that same kind of in-person assistance and what were some levers that we had here at Suffolk Law School to help people and able to get access to things remotely at this time when suddenly they couldn't go to legal aid in person, they couldn't go to the Court Service Center, they couldn't go to a lawyer's office, and maybe that lawyer didn't have a way to help them remotely, at least not early on. And this was the other part of that problem, right? So the court was closed to a lot of matters altogether, but there was still this giant stack of processes that people needed access to that were emergencies. And it was a daunting problem for us to think about how we could tackle automating all of those problems. That was the lever that you've seen us use throughout the day, a guided interview that can walk someone through the form automation process, through the process of getting access to a legal right, rather, in court. And we had this huge mountain of forms that we had to try to get through. So one of our first levers was, hey, we know lots of people. So let's put out our own call to try to get lots of volunteers to help us do this. And Warren, you're probably smiling because you see, I think your face is in one of the others. Yeah, there you are. You're there in the bottom right there. And many of you did help answer that call. But once we figured out, let's put a bunch of people at this problem to try to get these forms automated, we had to figure out, well, how do we break up the work into smaller pieces so that actually somebody could do a meaningful contribution of that? This was the attendees of our very first Zoom call after we had this idea of let's automate all of these processes that are available for people to use in emergencies. This is just the first screen. Ultimately, we had more than 200 volunteers who work on this project. They were from 15 different time zones, 7 different continents, people from all over the world who wanted to put their energy into helping us solve this problem because they saw it as something they could replicate, and they were looking for a way to put some of their energy into a really critical problem in the pandemic. Ultimately, we had this vision that came through our brainstorming both before and during that call of building an assembly line. And that's what we do, and we have a lot of things we have to do at once, right? We break the problem into smaller pieces. We try to build some processes with people to be able to automate something like that quickly. And so we called our project the document assembly line. One of the ways that we did that was just by building lots of Kanban boards. This is an example of a board on Trello that we use to help organize our work. And the next step of that process, though, was to then actually take some of that and really automate the things that were happening with moving cards around, and to help take some of those steps out of the work effort needed for a human. So I have 2 metaphors to help you kind of understand what we ended up building. I don't know if anyone recognizes what this is. My favorite thing is to take really old references and use them in class and see. This one's not too old. It's 2010. That is 13 years ago. So one metaphor for this might be Inception. The also really old reference that I might like to use for this is Exhibit. Anyone recognize this image from Pimp My Ride, which now a very old internet meme. Yo dog, I heard that you like document automation, so I document automated your document automation. So what we actually did is we took Docassemble as our platform. That was the tool that we had decided was going to be the best one to use to actually produce these really easy to use guided interviews. And we built a document automation engine inside Docassemble that the output was not a guided interview rather than a document for someone to file in court directly. So it took that same concept of having an easy step-by-step workflow. The output is an interview somebody else can then use to actually get access to the rights in court. And that metaphor we thought was going to be really helpful for us to be able to do this work at scale. Here's an example of one of them looks like. So we're going to actually work together on a name change form. So I'm going to show you interactively just a few of the screens of the petition to change the name of an adult that we built in Massachusetts, so you can get an idea of like what goes into this. Part of the process was building this, something like this, at the end of a chain of steps. The other part of it was thinking through, well, what are all the different standardized components that go into this so we can reuse them again and again. And that if we make a change or a tweak to one of them, that change is reflected in all of the tools that we've then built. So that includes things like we built this really nicely styled read aloud button, for example, that's consistent, just the look and feel of the branding. Coming up with a decision about how you can change your answers as you go through the tool. Coming up with some consistent help information and pop-ups. Basic things like, well, who built this form? When was it last updated? Every form needs this. It's really hard to keep track of all those little bits and pieces when you're doing a bunch of these. And so we took away those things that could have been a checklist item and we just made them automatic and built into the tool. Every form that we've built as well has access to a feedback form where people can tell us responsive, like as they're running into problems or a usability issue, they could give us feedback to help us fix that problem. And they could share that form with someone else to tell them, hey, this is a great tool, you should use it. And maybe also to get some help from somebody in real time to actually share their progress in real time and what they're working on. So we're going to be building something like this so we can kind of look through what some of the concepts are. And I'll show you these screens that we're looking at right now. These are ones that you're going to build uniquely per legal topic. And I'll get to one of the ones that kind of comes from our form library in a second. Here's an example of something every form asks you for, which is your name. And this is a slightly customized version of a field that we built that's standardized and modular and can be used again and again. And so on. So this is the basic idea. We're going to show you how we did this with the building blocks in our tool. So these are the steps that it takes to actually do this yourself. You're going to do this hands-on in a second. First, you need to actually find the right form to automate. And I always talk about how automating a form, creating a guided interview, you're intervening at one stage in somebody's journey. Their legal journey is, I have a problem, now the problem is resolved. In between, they have to figure out, well, what scope of that problem do I need to use this form for? What do I need to know before I start this form? What do I need to know during the form that what are my expectations for what I need to know when I'm actually using it? And what am I going to have to do next? What am I actually have to do to actually exercise my rights in court? That's part of that early research phase where you're going to find and get that form ready. Using our tool, we kind of built an inside out process. So we started with the forms. We knew these are the things, these 30 or so processes that need to get automated in Massachusetts for people to have access to these core rights. And we built our tool to take advantage of the fact that these all have PDF court forms associated with them. So the very first step in our process is to go through and label all of the fields, all of those blank pieces of information on the form, get an associated label that the computer can then understand and associate a question with. Our tool actually pulls that information out of the PDF once you've specially prepared it. And then when you're actually using the Weaver tool, you will see you actually just answer those simple questions to build a draft of that interview that then can be customized later. And our approach with this tool was that we're thinking code first. We want this step of the process to be very easy and for people to finish it relatively quickly, because then they will take that product and be able to customize it later using the tools that are best for building software, which happen to be right now built around text-based code. So, but we're going to stay totally inside the web environment for now without actually having to write any lines of code ourselves. We skipped over that process of preparing the form and labeling it. We've done that for you. We've chosen a group of 14 states that we've gone through and specially prepared and labeled all those forms meeting our standard. Just to get a little bit of a vision of what that would look like. This is a very mechanical process. It can take about half an hour to an hour to do for a medium-sized form. You just go through a list of fields. You look on the screen onto the PDF form in something like Adobe Acrobat, and you say, okay, this is the context of this field. Let me see if there's an existing label I'm supposed to use for that piece of information. And if there's not, you follow some really simple rules to make ones up. But you don't have to worry about doing that today because we've done that for you. It was actually one of the best ways that we found to involve lots of these volunteers who had very small amounts of time to contribute to the project. I've shown you how we did this in Adobe Acrobat, but we actually have built, as part of this project, we built out a whole suite of tools to help you manipulate PDFs that are open source and don't require people to have a subscription to a tool like Adobe Acrobat. It still is kind of the best tool to use for the job in a lot of situations, but we couldn't possibly distribute licenses for Adobe Acrobat to all the volunteers we had involved in this project, and nor do we want to make that like a central requirement for someone to contribute. So something like just renaming a field on a PDF is something you can do totally through tools that we've built in a really easy to use way. And we also kind of encounter some of these other PDF problems that came up again and again, like adding fields to a PDF automatically. That's a really cool thing Adobe Acrobat does. There wasn't an open source tool that did that we could find. So we kind of chained together the existing tools that are out there, computer vision tools that are free and open source, to add a step like that to our tool chain. All right. So today we're going to actually choose one of these pre-labeled forms. We're going to practice getting that context from the form using a really cool tool you're going to get a preview of today. You're going to learn more about that later in the afternoon at the reception. And then we're going to go through this in a guided way. And if you, at the end of the day, you all should have built a working draft of a name change form for your jurisdiction. And we're going to try to do all of this in about the next hour. And I think you're going to all be successful. All right. At least one more meme we need to include. The very first thing you need to do is to choose the form that you want to work on. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context. It's really interesting to do this deep dive into just name change forms, because what we did is, as we pulled all these states in, started alphabetically with Alabama, which turns out to be the perfect form for you all to do together, because it had about 7, I think it was about 7 fields total that we're going to have to work with. Relatively easy and straightforward. Florida, 150 fields. Very different approaches to the same problem, just to change your name. If you would like to be part of some bragging rights as far as like how many name change forms we can all build together in this room and online, that is great. You can choose one of those forms. Just be ready. It may take a little bit longer for the state that you choose. And you might encounter problems that not everybody else in the room is encountering, which might make it a little harder for us to help you move forward. Another idea, if you're really inspired to help automate all of these name change forms, you can always follow along live. And then we're going to keep all the tools that we're going to demonstrate today up and running at the same links for at least the next couple of weeks. So you can always jump on and do that later. I'm going to have a few folks in the room helping. Bryce is going to be one of the folks who's going to walk around and help people if they need it. Some of our lovely students who've used the tool have also volunteered to do that. So either way, you should have some support, but I think it's also fine if you just want to follow along with Alabama. All right, so here's where you're going to get the actual link. Like I said, if you are brave and all you have is your phone, you can try it on your phone. You can also visit the agenda link on your laptop. And we're going to just start by downloading one of these, the name change form for Alabama, if you want to follow along that way. And let me put this back up in case anyone really does want to do that. I'll leave that up for a second. Go all the way down on the agenda page. And then we're the second to last talk of the day here. You're going to click that link to get the form. That's the first thing we're going to do. So make sure that's somewhere either on your phone or on your computer. And if you do want to choose one of the other forms, that is totally okay. I'll leave that link up again for people to get to that point on their own. One of the things that we have found as we've been working on this process is we're just iteratively trying to move from that first vision of the Trello board to what are pieces of this process we can take away from human touch in order to scale our efforts even more. And we started by building some really nicely fine-tuned machine learning models. We're going to also talk today about how we got to a certain level with those, but we tried them recently with ChatGPT, and sometimes ChatGPT could do an even better job without any special training, which is really interesting. So we're going to keep exploring that and seeing how we can integrate things like ChatGPT more into this process of form automation. All right, I'm stalling a little bit to make sure everyone has a chance to get through that first step of downloading the form. See if I can see any thumbs up if people have gotten that far. All right. Next to the state name, you also probably saw this button, Ask Questions. So go ahead and click that button next. And you can take a look at, on one side of your screen, you might have that form open. I'm going to do that. And I'm not actually sure how best to get rid of that sidebar here. So I might actually just switch back and forth between the two. Hopefully you have a way to see the PDF at the same time that you're interacting with this interface here. And like I said, you're intervening at some point in your client's journey. The question that we are going to ask of this tool that David has built, actually called Find My Site, what we've done is we've loaded up into this link all of the information that's available on the web about a name change form for whatever state that we have listed there. And it's put together into a library, and we're priming GPT 3.5, or is it 3? GCP 3 still, right? Yeah. So it's the older version of the model. It's not the very newest one that you've been hearing about, GPT 4. And we primed it with this set of forms. And now we're actually going to ask that set of information some questions about it. Question we want to find the answer out to help us draft really good opening screen instructions for our guided interview is, what do I need to know to get a name change? And you can fine tune this, and I think you can keep playing around with the language to get a really nice, succinct prompt. And this is going to replace, maybe an hour of research that you could do on your own. Absolutely, yeah. I think it would be interesting to see different prompts that work for people, but I'm sure that one will do a great job.
Do you want to do that? Scroll up and click on
Oh, there's another option there. Suggest. So this one really is finely tuned with the pre-prompt is going to be a question form.
Get better success if you're trying to.
And remembering that orientation in that space, that timeline of that person's journey. This is something I think is really helpful for someone to know before they start using your guided interview. What do I need to know before I do it? You shouldn't have to include the state name, but you certainly can, because each of these libraries is tuned just with information about your state. And you're going to get some version back of instructions. One of the things that we have found works pretty well with ChatGPT and even GPT-3 is to add some more like refining instructions. So one I like to use. Oh, is that a caveat, David? Or
No.
okay. All right. Right at a 6th grade reading level. Something that takes hours of time to really hard skill to teach. Takes just lots of practice for us to do this. GPT-3 does a pretty good job, and you can access it with the Find My Site tool at tailoring the way that it's writing those instructions. So I'm giving it this prompt to write at a 6th grade reading level. These instructions don't look too bad. They're relatively concise, but let me just try asking again with that additional refinement. Does not actually look like it changed the response, David. Is that... Okay. Okay. Let me try this. If I read at a 6th grade level, I'll give it the instruction, the conditional before the question part. I could even say one of the things that we know from readability in plain language is that just because somebody reads at a 6th grade level, this is something that my friend Caroline Robinson likes to say all the time, doesn't mean that they think at a 6th grade reading level. So maybe I want to add that little bit of extra context to say, if I am an adult who reads at a 6th grade reading level, because it doesn't have to be a childlike concept, it just has to be vocabulary that's accessible. Okay, doesn't seem to have changed it still, but.
Yeah, just to be clear, the question prompt is going to be very high.
Very weighed. Okay.
If you want to do a little more, sure, but I'm curious also what other people get in other questions.
Yeah, people might have some interesting prompts that they use. So the point is here. Yeah, go ahead, Warren.
I noticed this version it wants to be Alabama back from the fort and before it was before.
Oh, okay. So there's some slight changes. All right.
We'll discuss all that wonderful fun at the later talk this afternoon.
So you have to be careful with something like this, right? Even though we're weighting it towards a really specific library of forms to ask, and it can kind of summarize and fine tune that, there's still a risk of errors. And I will say that GPT-4, which is the model that's not yet accessible for us to access over API, seems to be doing a better job if you've had access to it. If you're paying for the ChatGPT subscription, or if you have it in Bing Chat, it can be a little bit more flexible. And this is actually something, this is kind of like a demo that we were like, hey, it'd be cool if we can do this. This is the kind of thing we can build into the Weaver in the future and have a really nicely fine-tuned prompt that you don't even have to write.
Diego just discovered that if he has them Spanish.
That's pretty nice. Okay. So that was one of the first things we had to do was like, okay, just a little bit of research. We're going to pretend that replaced our actual hours of research because you're going to want to have double checked a lot of these inputs in real life.
There were sites at the bottom too.
You can see exactly where it got that information from. If we go back to the agenda that we had open, we, for purposes of balancing the load among everybody who's here in the audience, we made a couple different servers. That was the simplest way for us to do it. So kind of came up with this idea of having us group into 3 different sets of folks who will each use one of the 3 servers we have set up to do this demo today, just to reduce the chances of us crashing the server. And if you're an online user and you go back to this agenda link, you can choose server 1. If your last name ends in a letter starting with A through M, you can use server 2. Everybody else can use server 3. They all are going to take you to the same tool, just we're spreading out the work a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and open one in solidarity with our online users. I'm going to give everybody a second to do that. And now that you've done that step, you should see a screen just like this one, which says get started with the Beaver. So you'll see we have 4 buttons here, 4 different cards that you can click on. We're going to use the upload a form to automate. You can, there are other options. You can start building your form entirely through the Weaver with this second tab here, build from scratch. We have a link to a library of forms. Actually, this says 18,000. I don't know if today it's live yet with 30,000 forms. 24,000 forms. Okay. And if you've been working on this before, you can jump back into an old project with this last button. But let's go ahead and I'll click the upload a form to automate button. And just give me a hand signal of some kind if you need a second to catch up. Okay, looks like we're good. We're going to choose to assemble and download a completed form. And now we're going to take that PDF that we already downloaded. For me, it's going to be the Alabama name change form, and drag and drop that here to this big upload target. Our Weaver tool actually works with specially prepared Word documents. PDFs actually can work a little bit more out of the box because there's already a way to know where the fields are supposed to go. But either way, it's a good idea to prepare them in advance before you upload them. But they don't have to be PDFs. They can be Word documents as well. If anyone has any questions as I'm doing this, also feel free to jump in with questions. I'm happy to take those as we're going through the screens. All right. We built this first screen here as a quality control step. So we had lots of volunteers who were doing, as I said, doing the labeling, preparing forms for us to then automate. Maybe a different person would be doing the automation from the labeling. So this screen here just gives you a check as to see what fields are in the form, to make sure that they were labeled correctly. We highlight the ones with bold if they come from our library of shared questions. Remember, I said we have this concept of building questions or things like names, addresses, court information that the automator doesn't have to customize unless they choose to. So most of the fields on this form are in bold, which is, as I said, this form is mostly standardized. There's only a few things that we didn't think of as being pre-concepts that are a little bit unique to Alabama. Although most of this is not fine-tuned for name change forms. Mostly it's every kind of court form in the world that you could automate. So these non-bold ones are the custom ones. And what we're going to do, you could spend a lot of time here if you were part of that quality control stage. We've done our best to get all of the forms ready through this. So we can just go ahead and check all of the boxes to indicate that things look right. There's a preview here. Again, you can see and compare to make sure things are filled in the right spot. If things aren't correctly named, you can rename a field on the spot here with this button. We're not going to click that though. We're just going to check all of the boxes. Okay. This is the first screen where we kind of have a little bit more chance to give some input. Go ahead and put your name here. You're the author of this guided interview. And we're going to go ahead and choose the state that our form actually is for as the default state. That's going to help people filling in their addresses. It's also, as you'll see, it changes the branding with one specific version of the output. And just to kind of give you an idea here of what these are, let's say that we've tried to build this tool so it's flexible and can be extended in lots of different jurisdictions. So we have a placeholder here for any state. It kind of puts the seal of that state in the branding. We've built and customized, as you can imagine, a lot of things that are really Massachusetts specific. And we have a few other branding packages built in here. But it's actually possible for you to upload your own custom branding package and have that always be used when you're using the Weaver. And you can even change all of the output is itself a template that you can customize for your own uses. You don't have to do any of those things. We just have to make sure we've checked none of the above for branding, and we can leave everything else the default after we've changed the state name. It's a good idea to include a link for more information about your form, but you don't have to do that step right now. You can just leave this line here blank. We're going to say that this is a form that's related to a court. That basically means it's going to note it. It's going to ask questions about the court. This starts a new court case. This is a petition to get a name change. So we're starting a new court case. We have some Massachusetts specific questions we can skip right over. And this is a family law form. So this list of categories here comes from another project that Suffolk was involved in to build something called the, NISME, National Subject Matter Index version 2. It's been rebranded to taxonomy.legal, and they call it the list taxonomy. So that's the taxonomy we're using here. We just have the top level categories. So we're going to choose family. That just basically tags it so someone can find the information, the form that they're looking for a little bit better later. Anybody need me to slow down so they can catch up? Or we thumbs up if things are good pace, everybody? All right. What does this form help the user do? So right here on this line, we want to answer that question. And we have a really good prompt there in our example image. Ask the court to change your name on official documents. You can choose your own wording, but you can see here, this appears on the first page. It's kind of telling the person who's using this guided interview that they're in the right place. You can literally copy that wording that's in the image. That just happens to be the image that we're using in the Weaver. You'll have to customize the wording on your own for a different type of subject. Okay, so the title and the navigation bar, it's a little bit different. You notice when you're on a web page, you tend to see the title of the page right there. It's going to appear in your history. That's the title that we're changing here. It also is going to appear where this AL Weaver logo goes right now. Might be good to include the name of the state. And we've given a draft description, but let's make this actually make grammatical sense. This interview helps someone in Alabama ask the court to change their name, not your name. And once I added Alabama in parentheses, I actually had to come up with a short version of that logo for mobile devices. And let's take that auto-generated instructions, that context for the name change that we made earlier, and let's put that here under the what does your user need to know before they start this interview. So we've kind of given someone some structure to do this on their own, but let's go ahead and just replace that structure. Pretend we're just going to use what we get directly from Find My Site. And we can come up with our best guess. This actually is really helpful to give people a rough guess for how long it's going to take them, even if we're pretty far off. Let's say I think this actually is going to be a pretty short interview for Alabama. If I were in Florida, maybe I would give people more time to do it. But let's say it might take about 20 minutes to complete this process. And that's, again, really important information for someone to have before they sit down and finish it. Because if they're going to be interrupted in half an hour, we don't want them to start a 2-hour process before they have enough time to actually do it. So we asked this question about every person that the Weaver recognizes as appearing on the form. So some forms just have one user. In this case, that's true. It's the petitioner who's asking for the name change. In lots of cases, you have a petitioner and a respondent, or plaintiff and a defendant, and it would ask this question as well. There's only one person who's petitioning the court to change their own name if it's an adult. So we can choose that exactly one option. Now here's where we've figured out this is not the greatest UX yet, but this screen here basically allows us to think again about our form, right? Each of these blank spaces, there's some prompt for how the person's supposed to answer that question. And we're trying to replicate that in the guided interview. It might be helpful to have the form open again at this point, but you can probably actually get it from the context of how we've named the field already. So we want to go through and give a little prompt that makes sense for that piece of information. As we say here, this prompt is going to be short. It's what appears to the left of the field itself where someone types an answer. You don't have to worry about providing all of the context someone needs to know to answer that question yet. Just a little bit of context. You can add more a little bit later. And we have the ability to change what type of input it is, but the default should be fine for your form. It does a pretty good job of guessing what type of input to use. For the most part, you're just going to keep it as a text field. If you know the person needs more room to write an answer, you can change it to an area field. And there's lots of other options here, but mostly you can leave that alone. I actually don't really have to customize almost anything right now. I might rephrase this to say, why do you want to change your name? Or maybe like reason for name change, because maybe I want to keep it as a simple prompt. One option I might choose here as well is to let someone send, to use more room than appears on the form. This is a judgment call. On a PDF, there's limited space. The way we solve that is by adding an extra page to the output, which is called an addendum. And this is actually a reasonable amount of space. You might not really want to encourage someone to use more than 2 or 3 lines. It might actually overwhelm the court. But for now, we could choose that option to send the extra text to, if someone has more to say than fits in the 2.5 lines, we can let them do that. One more chance to double check our work. Now what happens is we're going to take all of those individual pieces of information and group them in some way. And I'll show you, we actually have built our own model to do this for you. We're not using it today because it doesn't perform well enough yet for us to feel like it's going to save you time. But we think it's going to keep getting better as we do more training of it. I also have found out that GPT-3 and GPT-4 do a pretty good job of this problem. So maybe we're actually going to be outsourcing that to OpenAI to do that kind of grouping for you. For now, let's just think through, let's look down at what fields we have to assign to a screen. We have some basic contact information, just the person's work phone number. And let's give that screen a title that makes sense, that describes the group of questions that are on that page. I think that's the only one that really relates to someone's work phone number. I think actually maybe this one's more important, reasons for name change. We have a chance to give more context. So right here where it says text under the title, we can give as much information as we want to help somebody answer that question correctly. Probably best to not use that much though. I think I learned this from the Nielsen Norman group. They have this statistic, which is If you have more than about 110 words on a page, your user's not going to read more than 50% of it. So you usually don't want to provide too much information right there on screen with a guided interview. But we could give a little bit more information, like maybe we want to give someone some examples of reasons that they could use. For example, I want my name to conform with my gender. That's a reason that someone might have for changing their name. The last of these seem to be about just proof of identity, and those seem to make sense to go together. And I probably should double check the form to see if that's actually what they seem to be about, the form. Yeah. So it's this question here, it seems to be out right here. The attached copy of my photo ID is answering this radio button plus these two empty fields. So I could rephrase it to say, actually, I think you need to attach a copy of your photo ID. What kind of ID do you have? That's it. We've just built our first guided interview. So here I have a chance to see what I've built and make some changes. You can spend some time playing around with this more. And you can actually click through and revisit any of the choices that you've made previously. You can also rearrange the order of the questions so that they make sense to you. But we kind of have mocked up here some little screens that show you kind of that workflow of someone getting from start to end of the guided interview. And you can see both our custom screens and some screens that always are going to appear. Like we always show people a preview of what they're going to sign before they sign it. We let them sign it, and we have a download screen if it's an interview that asks for someone to download it. So we can change the screen order for some of the questions that weren't custom. I probably might keep this, why do you want to change your name question early? Maybe I also want to ask for somebody's preferred name right up front. That seems like a way to give that user some respect when they're using your form for a name change. So we can play around with the order of the questions here for a little bit. And then these other ones seem to be more like very personal. Maybe someone wants to understand the value of your tool before you ask them what their address is and their phone number and birth date. Maybe birth date's something you need to ask early to make sure they're using the right form because they have to be at least 18. Looks like actually it says 19 according to Find My Site. So maybe an 18-year-old can't use it. But... All right, so now once we've made that change, we're back at the preview screen. The last step after we've finished tweaking this to our heart's content is to click continue. One more time. And we actually have the output now of our interview, which is a Docassemble guided interview. Okay. So once you've gotten to this point, I'm just going to ask you all to click the download your package button. That actually downloads the completed interview as a zip file. And we can take a look at what's inside there. First, there's all of our questions, which are going to be this text file. And I'm going to try just see if it's easy for me to open this in Notepad. So we've saved you from writing this couple hundred lines of code. But actually, if you look through, you'll see the code is relatively easy to read and to change if we need to. So that was one of our priorities, making sure that the code that it generates is not just spaghetti code that you can never change in the future. If you want and need to make changes, you can without having to undo the helpful things that we've done with the Weaver tool. And of course, we have our name change form. But we've also generated this next steps document. That's the other side of it. What do you need to know after you're done using the name change petition? And we've just built it. We kind of assume people won't really have the time or the knowledge to customize that document right when they're using this tool, that they're going to take some time to try using it and talking to practitioners more before they're ready to write this. Although I think we might change it so we do draft a bit more of this for users in advance during the Weaver process. But this should be a really good starting point for that really important step in your guided interview, which is, what do I do when I'm all done? And you'll notice this is actually a zip file. That's the actual package. That's what you can upload to your Docassemble server to keep customizing it. You could also install that on a server to run it. Let's see what our interview looks like. It's going to take me just a minute because I didn't pre-log into the server. So while I am loading this up, I encourage you to play around a little bit more. We kind of sped through the Weaver tool. You can use the review screen to keep making changes to what you've drafted and see what you come up with. Or if you're inspired, we have about 40 minutes left on the session, I think. So you could try running another form through and see what things you learn and discover. And while I do this, you can also ask questions. Yes, Jonathan. Oh, sorry, mic's for online folks. Good point.
This was amazing. Can you create branching logic in this? So like if someone's married, you ask them, are you married? And if they say yes, then there's going to be some questions you show them. And if they say no, then you won't show them those questions.
That's a really good question. We have decided that that is not something we want people to do in the Weaver. That was our first vision of it anyway, because we were thinking about dealing with 200 volunteers and we were like, you don't necessarily have the context to add that kind of question yet. But it's something you can do really easily in the Docassemble playground. That said, now that we've kind of shifted to working more with folks like Aleo in Louisiana, where there's a person who's trained who's doing it, we actually think we are going to add that time-saving step right there into Weaver. Yeah. Daniel.
Are there any discussions around, like, I don't know, it feels like pro bono lawyers and could be, when you're trying to leverage their time for maximum value, this seems like a great way to do that. Are there any sort of thoughts or discussions about how to leverage that pipeline?
Yeah, actually, that is something that we've been starting to have conversations about, because we had this great pool of volunteers early in the pandemic. I think you're right that an in-house law department or a law firm who has attorneys who are interested in pro bono projects could use a tool like this really well. Yeah. So that's an early discussion for us. I'm realizing my password's like 20 characters, so it might take me a while to
good information security
to put it in here. But so actually, yeah, actually this is good. Maybe between David and Bryce, maybe we'll answer some questions while I puzzle over my password a little bit more. But I want to keep, this is great. These are great questions.
Yeah, keep them coming. What do we got?
I have to figure out how to also, let me see, I might have to make sure I don't make a mistake.
I have more of a comment, but I'm on my phone and I was unable to drag to change the order of the fields. So I already passed that screen, but yeah, just.
That is a great, but I want to point out that I'm looking here and you've gotten all the way to the end, which is really cool. But yes, mobile not optimized. Thank you. But I'm amazed that you got to the end. That's actually really, I'm very excited about that. I'm very easily impressed. Yeah.
So for dates, do you have a way to just refer to a day, a month, a year, if there's different PDF fields?
Do we have, the question was about dates, is that right?
Yeah, structured date structures.
Yeah, so we actually have two different, I think it might totally not be possible for me to get this. I'm going to maybe shift to bring up my laptop and I can join the Zoom and present from there.
Why don't you bring up the laptop and I'll fill the date question.
Okay.
So The answer at the end of the day with all things is enough time and money. It's possible. Here we're mostly dealing with time because Jonathan has been nice enough. This is open source product. Often what we tend to do though, if the PDF has a set of dates that are set, we'll read that in and we handle some of that on the front end with the labeling. So you would label one date, and then actually you can then programmatically pull out the month, the day, the year, and then have those go into the right spots on the field. But that also means that the user is only asked for an actual date as opposed to having to do that. And once you move past the Weaver, I mean, you're really talking about being able to program basically anything your imagination can come up with. That being said, one of the things we're trying very much to do in the assembly line project is to make it so that people don't have to repeat that work. So in working with the folks we have a question bank of questions that we use. So, you want to ask a question about someone's name, we've got that already there. You want to ask address already there, and it will also connect out to an API and do address verification. You want to ask about sex or gender. We have questions that we've put together and designed in such a way so that they can be inclusive for all the people who might be using your form. And we're trying to add more and more of those things so that it's a menu you can just sort of pull from. But at the end of the day, it's entirely customizable too. So not just configurable, but customizable. And that's really why we made the decision to go with the code environment as opposed to just using something that is just configurable, like a drag and drop tool, because then you're limited by whatever it is we were able to think of when putting that tool together. I'm stalling as Quinten enters his very, very secure long password.
Well, I'm
And-
just switching because it's
Oh,
like,
he's going to his,
never going
he's
to
going
type
to
it
his
by hand.
desktop,
It's
then
okay.
into his laptop. That's right. Which is good. That happens to me too when I'll sign in for something in the lab with the class, and I'll pull out my phone because I have my password vault because it's some insane thing that I would never be able to remember. Yeah, really fun until your password vault goes away. Be sure you have that master password somewhere. It happened to me. It was not fun.
How are you choosing the sources that are shown at the bottom of the site here? And does that connect to things like the CFR or case law or any of that?
Yeah, so question was specifically about the Find My Site tool, which is sort of a separate bit, but we can talk about that. We can talk about it later too. We'll talk more about it. For our purpose, what that tool is doing is it's just looking at, for the most part, just looking at the instructions that were available on the state website. So we did just a very quick pass to grab those ones. So it was the minimum amount needed to give you something to show you today. The idea there is that, as I'm sure a lot of folks know, these large language models have a tendency to what often is called hallucinate, which I will expound upon more upstairs. I tend to think of them as BS artists in that they are plausible sounding, but do not have any concern for accuracy. And what we've done with the Find My Site tool is just to link it to a trusted set of texts so that it tries to constrain what it's going to say to something that we know actually has the answer in it. And it actually drastically limits, I will not say eliminates, but limits its tendency to BS. This is a use case where it's nice because the person who's using it can then very easily check it before it becomes something that is put out into production, but might actually help you do a lot of work. So for example, when I was programming something the other day, I used one of these tools just to get a data structure together. I needed a Python list of all of the states and their abbreviations. And I could have gone to Wikipedia or wherever and tried to find it and reformat it, but I just was able to ask one of these tools to do it, and I got it, and I could easily check it with myself and know it was accurate, but I saved myself a lot of hassle. Maybe I should change in my pattern on the stalling. Other questions?
So I'm good. So what I actually,
good. Okay.
I did realize like one of the challenges I'm going to have is to switch between to actually get the file to my laptop. So I'm just pivoting to one of the forms I was testing earlier, but it's very similar. You won't see the screens I customized because I just was trying to speed through to the end. But here's a name change form for Maryland that I have working here without as much of the fancy customization that we did. But one thing you'll see here is we have like the state seal on the left. That's just one of the like little mini branding things. I love how easy it is to customize the appearance of Docassemble interviews. And we've gone really light touch here in terms of how much customization that we're doing with what you get out of the box. But for example, if I change that to say, Massachusetts, I'm going to get the Massachusetts state seal. Because somebody at some point built this open source package with logos for every state, the official state seal for every state. Easy for us to kind of pull that in and help people with that quick step in that process. This should be short enough that we can kind of get through to see what the output looks like and some of the other standardized pieces. Even though I didn't do a great job changing the screen order to make sense or making these questions really that logical. But I can do that. So here's an example of something that you do right away, which we should actually integrate right into the Weaver, to Jonathan's point. This question here, like the name of the sex offender, if you registered as a sex offender, what names was that under? This second question shouldn't appear unless you answer yes to the first one. So that's the kind of thing where I would actually go into the code to change it. This is what we have. My students have learned how to do this really well and quickly. And essentially to become familiar and comfortable with these kind of changes, once you've gotten it out of the Weaver product, I think takes a few weeks for someone to learn and really get up to speed. It's pretty accessible given the power that you get at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do is figure out what screen I was on. Because this is on our development server, every screen ID appears right there on the page. I'm going to find that screen and just add the logic that it takes to make that question conditional. So it's just typing the word show if, and this is the question it's dependent on. So once I've made it that change, I can refresh and make additional changes. So this process for a form that's like this size, actually kind of exciting, like to get to that rapid prototype stage. One of the cool things about this process that we think makes it helpful is that your prototype itself is something that can be continually updated and refined and customized without losing the benefit of getting you a quick tool you can demo to users and get feedback on that they can play around with. So I did a name change form as a demonstration for Utah, and I timed myself. I obviously have worked on building the tool and have used it a number of times, but it took about an hour and a half start to finish to get it to a point where it was actually, I thought, a pretty good tool that I would be happy to share with people. Because it's mostly making little changes like that one I just showed you that you have to learn how to do. And then one of the things that Suffolk's been providing through our, one of the things that we can provide to states, for example, who are trying to do this, is we can provide the resources to answer those questions. Once you get beyond that 80% of features you use all the time, to that 20% of tricky things, we can step in and help answer those questions for people so they're not stuck without any expert support. Okay, so that's, let me see. I might actually be worth getting through to the end just so you see what it looks like at the end, because we didn't do that yet. So I'm going to answer these kind of silly questions to do that. This is not the one that I refined. It was just my test form. We've integrated Google address autocompletion. That's one of the cool features. That was at a LSC hackathon that we did that a while ago. I guess that was 5 years ago because it was when my son was born. I couldn't attend in person. My youngest son, at least. Here's the date question, I think. I didn't quite hear the answer, but yeah, we do have a date input here, which is more comfortable for people to use for putting in something like a birth date. You've probably all interacted with those terrible default mobile date inputs where you have to scroll through and click 30 times to get to your actual year of birth or more. So we actually did a little bit of UX research on this to figure out what input people could use successfully to enter their date of birth. And this is the one that makes the most sense to most people. A drop down for month. So you don't have to worry about what that first field is. Is it a month or is it the day of the month? So this is a drop down. So it's unambiguous. And then the day and then the year. You could probably continue to improve this, maybe making the day input a little bit narrower. I think actually that's one of the changes that's almost ready for us to go live with. Yeah. And I'm going to just say no. This is one of the screens we spent a long time thinking about, like what does the court actually need to know from someone to figure out how to reach them? Not everybody has a phone number or an email. So this other box is really important. And oh, I didn't test this enough to make sure there wouldn't be an error, but we did spend a lot of time thinking about how can we actually help people recover from errors. This is helpful too. So for example, like the default is to get a really kind of scary error screen. So we spent some time thinking about what do we want people to be able to do if things fail. So this might actually still not work for this particular form. Yeah, but we just give people other resources and context. In some cases, we can actually help them download the form that's in progress and help them report what they need to know to be able to actually resolve the error. So I'll stop there in terms of showing you things. So I think I want you to get some time to practice and to ask more questions. Looks like some questions might have come in on the chat. I'm gonna stop this share and share from this screen again.
Number of questions there. It looks like Bryce has answered a lot of them.
There was one question about using locked forms. And since certain courts and most government bodies will end up locking their PDF forms, so someone can't go through and edit it. Maybe for usability reasons. I don't think it's super clear. But in short, the Weaver will still work with them, but you won't be able to relabel those fields. So you sort of miss out on a big part of the Weaver. I know Quinten mentioned—
You could do like a multi-step thing though, right? With our tool.
Yes, yeah, we do the multi-step thing. And also, I know you mentioned that we use Adobe a lot. We also sort of early on used a lot of Documate, now Gavel. They have a PDF unlocking and renaming tool that we've used a lot and sort of is a good inspiration for us. That does unlock court forms for purposes of this. For all we're doing is just changing the internal name of the field to say it's an address instead of top field form number 5, whatever.
So yeah, they were one of our early partners actually. Documate helped. We worked with them to figure out what features they needed in the renaming tool to make it work for our uses as well. This is the open source, or at least the free access tool that we kind of point people to using the most. It's a great question.
Other questions? So I think I heard one question just sort of around here was how did you get to the point where you were editing this stuff? So if it wasn't clear, that's you got the output file and then you had to access a Docassemble server to play around. Did you want to talk about that a little?
Absolutely. So the output of this is really just a text file that you can edit on your computer. And I think I still have it open here. But there's a nice feature with your Docassemble server. It can run and host your interviews. It also has a simple editor interface too. So you can use your preferred editor if you want. It's just a text file. I tend to use an editor from Microsoft called Visual Studio Code. That's the one a lot of Docassemble developers end up using. But if you want to make small changes, you can do them right on your server without having to download any extra software. And that's what I was showing earlier.
And if folks are really, really interested, there will be a beginner's guide to using Docassemble tomorrow at 2 up on the 5th floor and virtually as well. That's following the morning sessions on Docassemble. On Docassemble.
Show you a couple of other things while people are kind of percolating questions. So one is like, where do we think this tool can go next? And that's been one of the questions that's come up. So One is that we think there's more ways for us to integrate these questions. Like as more forms get automated, we can start to pull out the ones that come up again and again as questions and integrate them into our question bank. So that's like a really nice time-saving feature for developers. And it's not like you have to have an all or nothing situation. You can choose, just like we had that branding package where I could change the appearance of the interview. That could also be a place where you layer in additional questions that are specific. So we could have built one. We didn't think to do that for this demonstration. We could have built one just for name change forms so that the question that asked for what is your name was more clear and said, what is your legal name, your current legal name? We could have layered that in so it only appeared for people who were doing name change forms and they selected that in the Weaver process. You can think of like using this to build kind of templates for all kinds of areas of law where you're automating a number of forms to help you save time and keep your things looking more consistent and neat. More advanced editing features, the logic feature that came up as a question from Upsolve, that's an example of something that we keep on our roadmap. And I'll show you this last thing. We were almost brave enough to demo it for you, except it still, I think, has a long way to go before it's a really useful tool, but it's a really cool and fun tool as is right now. This is our I'm feeling lucky mode. I had pre-selected a form, but I'm going to just show you what it looks like on another form because it looks like that link's changed because you've updated to more forms. So, all right. So let's say that this is where we've indexed all of those 24,000 forms. We're going to learn more about this afternoon, I think, right? If I visit one of these forms here and let's see which one of these maybe looks good. Maybe I'll go back to one of the Massachusetts ones that I've worked with in the past. Agreement for judgment, I think, should be a pretty simple standardized form. Okay. So what we're doing is we have built this model that will take the name, which you can see here was in italics, really confusing name. And we've simplified it to something that makes more sense for a developer to work with directly. And we've actually grouped the screens automatically using some like simple rules plus another simple model. And all of that is fed to our Weaver tool that can take that information, pull it in from this URL. And you get this button. So all those things we just did interactively took us 20 or 30 minutes. We could replace with one click of this button and get right to the review process just to make the changes we need to from what the computer's best guess is about how to describe this form. So we have been playing around with GPT-4, and I'll just show you one thing. So this is not bad. This is a good starting point. Having solved that blank page problem is really important in development. But I asked GPT-4 this question. I took all of the fields from an interview, from a PDF that is, and I said, okay, take these fields and group them onto screens. And it did a really good job, actually, just out of the box. So this is something where we're continuing to look at to see if we can kind of take some of those steps where we really do need humans and to reduce that to just really a review stage. Right now, what we have right now, I think it's a time saver, but you know, you would do a lot of work undoing our current guess, leveraging something like GPT-4. I actually think you'd really just be in that point of just making small refinements to getting a draft that you can keep customizing.
I do appreciate how you went from we were thinking about demoing this to you, but weren't sure, and then just went ahead and started clicking on buttons. The amount of sweat that was pouring out of my.
Well, I was thinking of having all of you use it is what I meant. Yeah, but I think you would have found it more confusing to go through and make changes than to what the linear workflow we did instead.
See your 20 minutes done to 10 seconds there.
Don't feel bad because as you can see right now, the computer didn't do that great of a job with the names of the fields or with the grouping, but it's just going to continue to get better and better. And we can see that around the corner.
All right. Other questions? Yes. I'm going to be the guy who runs with the mic.
Just to echo Jonathan, this is really cool. And but two, I mean, I feel like one of the dangers and what you just demonstrated, I think, is a solution to it, is that putting the power of document form creation or like guided interview creation in the hands of anybody is that they just make bad guided interviews, right?
Right.
Like that's like what happens a lot. And I feel like what you just described, what you just showed is sort of the solution to that, which is, hey, we'll generally nudge you into a roughly good interview and then you can adjust thereafter. So the default is like a quote unquote good interview. So that's really cool. That's really intriguing. Is there any effort, but this is a totally different topic, but is there any effort on the court side to try to get courts to standardize or at least try to improve the way that they're labeling those fields to make this easier for you to actually accomplish?
I don't actually know of an effort like that. That's
Well,
a really
that's
interesting question.
Margaret's group is actually
With labeling the
fields.
not at the court level though.
Well,
right?
they actually are dealing with it. So there's some folks
Okay.
at Stanford who are running a form simplification group. I forget sort of the name of it. And they have they've worked with us and are thinking about name changes. And they're working to sort of come up with a set of common field names. I think they're having a harder time getting traction on that than they would have originally liked. But that was one of their stated goals. And it's towards this ability to then be able to be cross-jurisdictional. I think they may have moved into like, we'll just build one form to rule them all. So it might be now a different set of problems. But that was one of the original ideas, was just to get them to agree on field names.
Yeah, I don't know if people are doing it like at the PDF level, but that is a really interesting point. I mean, what we're trying to do is to build our own tools to do a good job of doing it from just the PDF. Like even just a scan of a PDF eventually, right? You could look at it, get the text from it, figure out where the labels are and then put them in. But courts doing it would be great, I think. Yeah. Related to that, what you're talking about with simplification and saying, actually, how do we build good tools? That's something we're really interested in. Are we going to be demoing Rate My PDF upstairs? No
Or of
exception.
what don't steal the thunder, please.
Okay, so I won't steal your thunder. So you're gonna actually see, we've been really thinking deeply about how to make forms better, not just how to build more of them and automate more of them, but how to make them better. One of the ways we're doing that is to try to measure what makes forms good or bad. So that's an academic research project, but then you can take that information and put it with a model and actually measure things in an automated way. And that's the technology part of the problem. We're doing that both for PDF forms, which is, I think, what you're really going to demo upstairs. We started out by focusing just on Docassemble interviews. We pivoted pretty quickly because we're like, wait a second, there are not that many Docassemble interviews. As I just said,
Yet.
we have 24,000 forms that we gathered from 47 states.
46 states in the District of Columbia.
There's a lot of really bad court forms out there. So if we can tackle that problem of making those PDF court forms better, that's where we wanted to start. But we can tell you things like what's the average readability of this form, and that's on a per page basis. Actually, when you're using a Docassemble interview, that's a statistic that's built in to every screen. It's in here somewhere. Where is it? Very bottom. Okay. So this tells me this page is designed at a 7th and 8th grade reading level right now. So we're taking bits of information like that, and we can do it on a Docassemble interview, but we kind of slowed that down and pivoted to PDFs, where we've gotten actually a really nice instrument that we think is almost ready for people to start using as is. But kind of taking that idea of like trying to make things more high quality rather than just more of them.
I bet Quinten's really sweating now because the total Luddite colleague over here is about to ask a question. So this is not a technical question, but these are actually two things I'm thinking about from my perch as someone who helps to lead a law practice in the clinical programs and works with clients, and also someone who teaches legal ethics. And I apologize if this is not a tech-oriented series of questions, but the first one is, when I think of people all around the country sort of being able to make automated forms, I wonder what happens to the data they're collecting, and if there's any conversation around that, a person thinking about like seeking an abortion, or, or a minor seeking a minor, or not minor, adult seeking a name change, for example, and then where does that information go, let's say. And then the other question is, one of the things about standardizing fields maybe is their promise in terms of data collection and understanding who's using our court system, like on the back end. Like I do adult guardianships. Massachusetts, they don't know how many there are. They don't know who's filing them. They don't know who's under guardianship. They know nothing about anybody using their court system because they're not able to collect that kind of data in a uniform way.
It's like you're teeing them up for me, Sarah. I don't know. That's a great question. So there's two parts of it, I think. One is, how can we safeguard data to make sure information does not leak to the wrong place? And the other one is, how can we make really effective and smart use of the data that we're collecting, whatever those data are. So the first answer is, we actually thought a lot about collecting data. Like, one of the things legal aid groups and that we cared about was, well, what's the usage? What are some analytics? And we designed from a principle of, let's collect the least amount of information we need in order to inform the questions that we have, that we really do think we want answers to, which are, how many people are using the tool? How far do they get in the tool? Like, where are they dropping off? And where do they get stuck? And roughly, like, where in the country or where in the state are they? So every Docassemble interview that comes out of the Weaver, it actually saves just one piece of information to a database, which is the zip code of the user if they provided an address. So that's where we're starting. And then if you as the developer want to collect more pieces of information, you can, but the default is to collect just that piece of information, preserve that. So we think people do want to know, like, where are their tools getting used? Maybe that's not safe for every situation. So maybe you want to take even that piece out. But we think it's a pretty good default. The other side is, if we do want to collect more information, what can we do to preserve it and to access it? I think there was like a lot of interest in things like data lakes over the years. I'm not hearing as much about it, but it could just be not my area of work. But we have been thinking about that. One of the things that you can do, if you follow all of our naming conventions from start to finish, suddenly you have a data set that's normalized, right? Everyone's using the same names for the same fields. And we want to keep growing that organically. Like, we're not giving a top-down list of, you have to use this, but if you do, you're getting really nice advantages. You don't have to write, I said there are like 7 pieces of information on that Alabama name change form, but actually it was like 30, right? We only had to answer and write custom questions for 7 of them because the rest were built in. So you save time by using those, and then you can compare this form to this form to this form because they're all speaking the same language. So we're trying to solve it that way by giving people tools that help them along the way. And then those data can be saved wherever is appropriate for you to save for your circumstance. You can build this alongside the court. The court doesn't have to change their case management system. If most of the cases come in through the guided interview, you now have a really good set of data for at least those users. You don't know if they're really different from other users yet, but at least you have information about how those users' journey is like, and what, how many they're having, what time of day maybe they're filing if you decide to collect something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities and potential there.
And also we've had different models with who we've partnered with on these things. So in some jurisdictions, the Docassemble server is living on the court. Right, so actually in Amanda's jurisdiction, the Supreme Court is the one who hosts the Docassemble interviews. So they're the ones who house all the information. In other places, like Matt's, Aleo is hosting the documents and then sending them to the court. So they have a copy as well. So there are different models for different jurisdictions. Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah, we have I think about 10 minutes. We have questions.
I don't know if these questions are supposed to happen at 4:30 or if they're related questions
okay.
or not. But one is, suppose I have my own database with my own clients and my own forms and my own case law. Is there a way to incorporate this sort of technology on my own database? And then second, if you're analyzing these metrics on those forms individually, are you also comparing the forms to each other say ontologically to say, oh, well, this set of forms is generally bad. This set of forms is generally good. These states require more. These states are more thorough and so on.
I can take you back to the Form Explorer page that we were just looking at and say like, yeah, so what we've done is we've kind of, right now we're gathering just a few pieces of statistics on this site. I'm not going to try to demo the Rate My PDF tool because you're going to do that later. So, but we actually have expanded to collecting a lot more information, and we do hope to do exactly that. We just are trying to be responsible about how we compare and rank states to one another. One thing we might do is we might use like pretty big buckets and say, okay, this is an A quality form. This one's B, C, D, and F. Maybe that will be helpful for people. Because we can say, okay, this form is really hard to use. We feel confident about that. But to say this form is X% harder than this form, we're going to be able to kind of group them by buckets, but maybe not totally an ordinal ranking form by form. So at a big level, yes, we think we'll be there. We're going to probably release something like that in the next few months, which really does say this state's forms kind of are around A or B or D, or maybe most of them are going to be around C, D, F, because I think that's probably true. And then you can upload your form to our website, which David's going to demonstrate, and get an individual ranking for that form. But the most important piece of that is going to be the guidance for how to improve the form, because we're going to be most confident about, okay, yeah, generally it's really hard to read. There's a lot of difficult vocabulary words. There's a lot of passive voice structures, for example. That's another thing we focused on. It's asking for 150 separate pieces of information to change your name. That's probably not a good idea. So we can tell people that, and then we want them to try to fix it using our best guess as to how to improve it, rather than focus on an individual ranking.
Was that a question? No. No.
All right.
One thing, I was just wondering, can you show everyone the exciting conclusion of an interview? Maybe get to the preview and download screen just so they can.
I can. I will show you. I will show you on a form that I know works, because that's going to be better than this is the live demo issue. Because this is our website with live forms. And I'm going to choose a simple one. I'll stick with the name change form that we just did. Although it's not that simple because it can do a lot. And I'll just get through all the way to the end so you can see. It's a great question. So here, yeah, this is slightly different branding. We've changed the color of the buttons and the navigation here a little bit compared to the one we were looking at earlier. I'm going to speed through with my happy path that I know should get me to answer it. I'm just going to, let's say it was a gender-based change here. So we've integrated lots of optional things. In Massachusetts, you have to publish your name, but you can ask to have that waived.
Balloons there, that's because the name change, if you're doing it for, there are only certain reasons for which you can do it. So if you were changing it because of a divorce or something, this would not be the one you used.
No balloons for the divorce. Actually, I don't know.
Well, maybe that's
for
actually
divorce, you would
appropriate,
get it too. Earlier, you heard about like integrating that request for accommodations. We've done that with the request for interpreters. So every form you can ask for an interpreter. Every form in Massachusetts, we have a nice database of court information, which is tied to your location. So this is the probate and family court for that address that I provided.
To override.
And let's see that input for date of birth again. Look, I can't type more than 4 digits. A little bit of safety check there. We integrated the fee waiver in every form, but I'm not going to do that today.
Waiver though. It really is.
That's one of those things that turns out every state has too, right? So we spent months fine tuning the resources to do a really good job of a form that asks for financial information. And Bryce had done a lot of work on that recently to keep refining and improving that. Okay, so now we're at the point where I can sign it. I'm going to sign so you can all see it with my mouse.
Texted it to his phone and then signed it there.
I could have done that. And again, I can't tell you how many I can. Probably it was, well, dozens of hours that we spent refining this page here to help someone know how to download the form. That last screen where you're asking someone to download it is a place where people can get stuck. And there's a lot of UX work that went into making it look nice. Just in time information. So, okay, you need to file this. Maybe you have to call the court to figure out where. We're putting that information right there in place for somebody. Then someone can download the forms either as one PDF or separately. I did learn we have to change this. We did some user testing just a few weeks ago where people did not know what a zip file was. And it's like, oh, you're right. We really shouldn't call it a zip. So we'll have to rename that. So the download buttons, and then you can send this wherever you like at the end. Thanks for that question.
You see it?
Sure. Here's our completed name change packet. I've customized those next steps instructions. Like that really key point. What do I do next now that I've downloaded this? Every form gets it by default from our interview. And everything is filled in. This actually has to be notarized. The reason we ask for a signature is because of the fee waiver petition could ask for a signature. But so we don't fill in the signature on this form because it needs to be notarized.
All right.
All right. All right, I'll let you turn things over.
Okay, we are again on schedule. It's amazing. What we're going to do is just give me a second here. I'm going to queue up all of our rapid fire talks. This is one of my favorite parts of the day. We have a number of presenters who are going to do quick 5-minute talks where the slides will advance 15 seconds at a time. If you're getting up, I assume you're just going to the bathroom because you're going to come back because this is going to be lit. Come on, it was the lab's name. It had to happen at some point. Okay, we'll see you all here in a second. Yes. And we're probably being broadcast to the people on the, just so you know. You guys have got to be loving the side commentary, huh? Oh, and am I still on Quinten's?
Will I see it advancing here?
Yes, you'll see it right here. And what I have to do is, where am I?